Many traditions claim the soul chose its life before birth. Whether that's true or not would be pretty difficult for us to discuss. But what would be even more interesting for us to explore is how the soul keeps choosing its life in every action, every day. Plato's philosophy offers an insight into exactly that. In Socratic terms, the only thing the soul takes with it after leaving the body is its education and nurture. Some of the most important Platonic dialogues conclude with a myth, what Hannah Arendt amusingly called an old wives' tale, for if the reader wasn't convinced by rational arguments, maybe a good old story will stick with them. In the end of the Republic, Plato gives us the myth of air. And briefly, it tells the story of a soldier who experienced what we would call today clinical death and returned to give an account of the experience. The myth offers a variety of possible readings, but one of its central themes is that souls must choose their next life before reincarnation, and each soul chooses its new human life through a glimpse of that future life. At this point, the soul can only choose according to its own character and conception of goodness. If it was shaped to love wealth and status, it would search for the life of luxury and abundance. If it was shaped to glorify the greatest achievements, it would choose a life of glory and fame. And if the soul's character determines what it chooses, then the choices it makes simultaneously reveal and shape its character. So, just as the soul discloses itself through the life it chose, so it discloses itself every day in its bodily life through its everyday choices and actions. The results of action and speech reveal the agent. As Hannah Arendt puts it, it is what we do in the world, privately, publicly, and politically, that eventually discloses the ideals that govern our day-to-day lives. In speech and action, a person reveals not only what they do in the world, their role, function, class, or talents, but who they are, a unique agent appearing among others. So, our actions disclose the character we've shaped. And just as an artist compares a finished painting or sculpture with the model that inspired it, so we judge ourselves against our ideals. But then another question arises: how is that character formed? Plato's answer is that no soul forms itself accidentally. In the laws, there's one interpretation I particularly love for the marriage laws. And in order to truly understand it, we'll have to step back and keep in mind that for Plato, generation and love aren't merely physical, especially in how Socrates considered himself a midwife of ideas. In the Theaetetus, Socrates explores how his mother used to midwife pregnant women, and therefore how he is grown to be a midwife of men. He describes how people would struggle with their mental conflicts and migraines, or intellectual labor contractions. Socrates would monitor their intellectual pregnancy through the arts of dialogue and dialectics. By asking questions, he explores how potentially fruitful or dangerous the insights are to the thinker. Socrates would never give answers, as he's not knowledgeable at all. He's just the one asking questions. The pregnant party is the one giving intellectual birth to all sorts of insights and realizations. So, bearing the idea that for Plato and Socrates, the ideas of birth, pregnancy, and generation aren't merely physical, but intellectual, the idea of marriage becomes even more interesting. In that framework, marriage must not only be a union with a literal spouse, but to a philosophy, with which you would generate and give birth to new ideas. In Magnesia, Plato's second-best state, as described in the laws, citizens who remain unmarried past 35 are fined. The penalty reveals the responsibility Plato places on every citizen to help cultivate the next generation. If actions reveal the agent, then remaining unmarried is not merely a failure to produce children. It is a refusal to bind oneself to any set of values strong enough to give birth to what comes next, physically or intellectually. When a soul grows older without committing itself to some wisdom tradition, it gets punished, not by any particular authority, but by staying ignorant through the neglect of its own development toward wisdom. Marriage, then, the search for a good spouse, or of a good system of wisdom-loving with which individual souls could cultivate a better understanding of the world and themselves, is crucial. In the Republic, Plato emphasizes how individuals and governments aren't disconnected. In Greek, the word for state, or republic, is actually politeia, and the difference is crucial. It emphasizes how the government and the people are part of a single organism, the police, the city-state, and how individual souls shape the ruling class through their character, while the ruling class shapes its people in return through legislation. In that context, the different forms of regimes Plato describes correlate to individual types of psychological states and states of mind. So if Plato's Republic is explicitly said to be an analogy for the soul, it's not only our governments that shape our characters, but also our self-legislation and self-rule through a love or marriage with particular ideals that results in different states of mind through which we perceive the world. Plato gives us 5 types of regimes and 5 ways individuals can become internally ordered: the aristocrat, the timocrat, the oligarch, the democrat, and finally the tyrant. Let's examine the individual who's chosen or married those particular sets of values. The aristocrat, ruled by reason. It's a person who's ambitious, courageous, and moderate, but always prioritizes wisdom and reason highest. They pursue high achievements and noble crafts only insofar as they're instrumental to realizing greater proportion and order of their soul. Then we have the timocrat, ruled by honors. A person who would also pursue high and noble crafts, but the honor in achieving them is far more satisfying for them than remaining orderly and cultivating a well-proportioned soul. Their ambitions, then, overrule the search for the highest wisdom, as wisdom becomes instrumental for achievement and honor. The oligarch, ruled by appearances, realizes that some pursuits are more noble than others, and that wealth and prosperity can be good possessions, but ultimately fail to realize what they're good for. In that mindset, appearance of power, wealth, and security replace genuine power and prosperity. The democrat, then, refuses to rank one set of ideals above another. The pursuits of wisdom, wealth, appetites, and honors are equally worthy. The person and actions ruled by appetite, ambition, or reason are equally measured. They pursue discipline today, but indulge in appetites tomorrow, treating both as equal expressions of freedom. Democracy as a system of pluralism, liberalism, and equality is crucial and perhaps a top priority in today's world as a legislative force, as Plato himself recognizes in the Statesman, where he argues that among corrupt constitutions, democracy is the most livable form of rule. The criticism in the Republic, in which I emphasize here, is directed less against democracy as a constitution in a corrupt world, and more against the democratic soul, which refuses to order its desires according to what is genuinely reasonable. The tyrant, finally, has been taken over completely by a particular desire. Their fractured self-worth and image make them ruthless rulers. Every conflicting opinion would result in the rebel being sent out to the guillotine, in exile or resentment. It's the person who can't tolerate even a mild disagreement, or the person who excessively uses reason as a hostage in service of their desires, to rationalize their bad habits, addictions, and abuse. Their ruthlessness shows up first inwardly towards themselves, but eventually manifests outwards to everybody around them. The point, then, is that those states of mind aren't just ends of some means. Rather, it is the soul's ongoing dialogue with itself, its deliberation about how to act, that continually shape its character. In this framework, the end doesn't justify the means. In this framework, the means and ends are one process. You can get the omelette without breaking the egg. Aristotle is in complete agreement with these arguments. Now let me quote this one. We become fair and honest people by doing things that are fair and honest. Moderate people by doing things that are moderate. And brave people by doing brave things. To summarize our point, ends and means aren't disconnected causes and effects in which some end would justify every means. What we practice, we become. It is not that our soul once chose a life in which we're now stuck at passively. waiting for another chance to choose more wisely. But it is now that we get to choose again and again with every action how we are going to shape our lives, character, and ideals. That being said, it's one thing to talk about this in theory and another to act upon it when life's trauma hits us like a tidal wave. Socrates was concerned for exactly this while waiting his execution in jail. It made absolutely no sense for him to accept Crito's offer to escape prison and save his life. To practice cowardice precisely when courage was most required, to shape his soul to fear that which he didn't know was bad, namely the death of the body, would have been not only a bad example to leave behind, but also a corruption of his own soul. At this point, there could be several different driving forces to shape Socrates' actions. He's driven neither by the love of honor and victory, nor by the oligarchic concern for security and status, nor by the democratic refusal to rank one course of action above another, nor does he seem to be a captive of his own desires, fearing seeking revenge or domination through a tyrannical form of action. Rather, through careful deliberation, he realizes that the state of his soul ranks above all other ambitions, fears, or desires, and that accepting his trial in the city-state in which he spent his entire life would not only be the ultimate embodiment of his philosophy and preservation of his soul, but would set a lasting example, for that is what he ultimately leaves behind. So, just as right before drinking the hemlock in his execution, he asked to take a bath so the women would not have to wash his corpse, so it was also bathing the only thing that would survive, the ethical memory of his teachings and the state of his soul. So, does the soul choose its life before birth? We have no idea. But what we can know is that the soul keeps disclosing its character through action in the private, public, and political realms, where it comes to judge itself, just like artists judge their creations, and day by day choose how to further shape its ideals and life, remembering that the chains of means and ends are inseparable. You can neither get the omelet without breaking the egg, nor can you become free while practicing fear, greediness, or other vices. So the question is not merely what life the soul once chose. The question is what kind of soul our actions are choosing today.